And can you talk about all of the players? I mean, you just mentioned James Madison, Patrick Henry, the slave states, and how this country came together based on this terror of slaves rebelling.
Yes,
enslaved people rebelling.
Yeah, the enslaved people rebelling, and
is it true what they telling me? Some of the past descriptions, what they revealed to me. The earth was given to the wicked, I'm saying literally. They blind the eyes of the judge, that's both you and me. I'ma open their eyes, make it where they can see. I know it's hard for you, and it's hard for me. But we gotta believe, he about to set us free. Come and rescue me, and you won't, I put my trust in thee. I'm going hard, you better wake up. Try to bring back Jacob, they don't listen when they getting caked up. Say, bro, you better raise up like Nehemiah, but to touch something, trying to slang something on the Sabbath day. To us, you tripping. This world, I gave it up. You better get out my way when it comes to my father, boy, I don't play. For my family, I risk it all, just so they can be safe. This walk of the faith, this walk ain't vain, this walk ain't vain. 14 and 28, tell me what you think that mean. Reevaluate your mission, man. You know, judgment's on the way. It can happen at any moment, or any time, or any day. It could. Some trying to be cool, on the sideline thinking they safe. And if Yasha ain't that deep, the judge ain't gonna throw out the case. Seems like an open prison cell to the moment it ain't. You came and gone and you went and came and did what you want, but now you can't. One day they'll say I'll pray, but can't. Too late. Angels came and took custody of your soul and dragged you away to the place of condemnation where there's no mercy or night or day. If you hear my voice, you alive today. Make the change, do it right away. Humble down and put the pride away. This truth hit hard like a tidal wave. Shaky ground gon' dissolve away, and all our sins gon' fall away. It is. Is it true what they telling me? I've seen my people rise up, coming out the church back to their identity. No more Christianity, following the ways of the heathen. Hey, YASHA, serving time for idolatry. Disrespect to anyone personally, for what they choose to believe. But they'll see, when they sitting in the judgment seat, when they hear his voice say, what was your trust in me? What was your love for me? Depart from me, you the work iniquity. I could've hurt the one that loved me. After all you done for me, nursed me back to help when I was in the midst of bad company. These nuances are struggling, how they creep in so suddenly and so subtly. The carnality part of man is so puzzling, how they juggle multiple sins at once, while the war rage on within us. On which one you gon' give up? Live up to the full measure of the Most High in Christ, to live my life as a sacrifice, because he paid the price and gave his life in replace of mine and yours. So tell me, beloved, why should he drive when we can choose to live life right in his sight by the power that worketh within, the same power that raised Christ from the dead when he laid in his life and reversed the curse of death of mankind. That's real. Seen too many spiritual casualties to stand by. They got too much on the line. If you think I'm gonna let that ride, I don't fall for the devil ride no more. I'm lacing up armor up with the full armor, and I'm out the door. Time to go, lace up. You know, live full of his word. Man should not live off of bread alone, but out of every word of the mouth of the Most High higher. For those that don't know, I'm praying and hoping you're seeing my growth. I ain't got nothing to prove, but a place to go. That's to the kingdom, and I see you on that straight and narrow road. When you get there, straight and narrow path, the path of the just, shining brighter and brighter, on to the perfect day. And I ain't mad at you. On this fourth day of the Daniel fast, I'm sitting back in my pad, face to the ground, heart in my lap, broken in half for the things that happened to us in the past. Yeah, it's somber, but it's grace lasts, and this year too past. Can't lose sight of the fact that prayers answered. Yeah, my heart breaks with my people, but I'm a man, so I gotta stand up. Bold in the faith while I'm in the seat with my hands up. Hey, I'm you a man, stop sagging, just pull your pants up. Repent of your sins and go down in water. In the name of YASHAYAH, MASHAYACH, and return to the Father. Surrender all, don't hold it back, that'll make you falter. He wants to hear from us all, his precious sons and daughters. Abba, you know what they did to me. Try to erase our history, then go and rewrite history. Try to hide our true identity, captivity and iniquity. Our Israelite was just flickering. Now we back on that law that led us to Christ, that is so full beam. How many know what I mean when I say I'm for the 18? The 18? That's right, the 18. Better know it when I get the phone spoken like a true showman. Ghetto spokesman, still 200 ferocious, protected by law and it ain't no poaching. We're his chosen, we his chosen. YASHA, 12 tribes to the 12 tribes and worldwide. it go? Give it to the Most High. As the scripture tells us in Ephesians 4 and 26, be ye angry and sin not. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath. In other words, not that you can't be hot about it, you know what I'm saying, for the misfortune, for the wrongdoing, for the injustice, but don't allow that to cause you to sin and break the Most High's law. Keep in mind that when YASHA was reviled and buffeted, he reviled and threatened not again, but entrusted to the care of the one who was going to avenge him, the one who was going to bring in that righteous judgment. And YASHA says that his judgment is righteous because he judged not after himself, but what he heard the Father says is that he does. That's St. John 5 and 30. I know it's been a little minute since I hit you with the extended version. I pray all is well, that you're stirring yourself up, you know what I mean? Encouraging yourself as you watch as well as pray during this season, because you got the keys to the kingdom. You got to manifest it, family. So we gonna go ahead, without further ado, get right off into it. Quick disclaimer to anyone that's easily offended or overly emotional or a proponent to the truth. This might be the time where you might want to go ahead and excuse yourself, cover your ears. Nah, you know what? Don't excuse yourself. You need to hear this, you know what I'm saying? This is for educational purposes only. No hate, just faith. All pun intended. Nah, but on a serious note, after a few moments after this recording here, I'm gonna come in with some more scriptures and just try to tie it all together so we can get a biblical stance from where they're coming from, what's being broken down in this conversation, on this interview, with this sister bringing it out. Let's get it. You know the scriptures say wrath abides in the bosom of a fool.
And that fear that, you know, so you have George Washington, who is a slave owner, who brings, in fact, some of his enslaved people to Philadelphia for the Constitutional Convention. You have Thomas Jefferson, who is not there, but he is writing into Madison, and Madison is writing to him. And one of the things that Jefferson is concerned about is slavery, is the way that it will be depicted. And so you have this silence. There's a silence in the Constitution. It's hovering over the formation of the Constitution, like Banquo's ghost, haunting it, shaping it, but not being explicitly said. But it is the power that is creating this sophistry, this really weird. We believe in freedom and equality, but we're not 20 additional years in the Atlantic slave trade. What they said in South Carolina was that South Carolina would be just a backward place. Our wealth comes from the Negroes. That is our natural resource, and we must protect it at all costs. So this is what is the part of the tectonic plates moving at this time in this founding of this nation.
Who says vengeance is mine? So we ain't gotta be mad.
Significance of the Uniform Militia Act of 1792 and its role in ensuring that weapons and guns remained in the hands of white people.
Yes, and so one of the first laws passed by Congress was the Uniform Militia Act of 1792. What it said was that all able-bodied white men between the ages of 18 and 45 would have to be part of the militia. And so here in the law, it is specifying white men. And it said that they must own a gun. This is part of, the militia is part of citizenship. It is how you give your service to the nation, how you provide your bona fides, as it were, as an American citizen. And so white men are the definition of American citizen in this framing, and that they must own a gun. And so what you see here is that the militia is given this high status in terms of what it means to be able It is sacred. It is one of those things that has been defined as the bedrock of citizenship. And so I started looking, and as I went on this journey, what I saw was that it wasn't about guns. It was about the fear of Black people. It was about the fear of Blackness. It was about the societal labeling of Black people as dangerous, as a threat to whites, and that this architecture comes in place in order to contain this Black population, in order to provide security and safety to the white community from this fear of Black people. And then you get this really weird matrix happening where Black people are feared but needed. And so it is how do we contain them? How do we snuff out their quest for freedom? How do we snuff out their quest for their basic human rights, while also keeping them as labor without rights? How do we do that? How do we make that subjugation happen? How do we talk about, in this land of the United States of America, how do we talk about freedom, but try to keep it contained from this Black population? We don't want them getting the ether that we're talking about in this revolutionary moment about freedom and democracy and justice. We don't want them hearing the words about equality. How do we do that? And when there was a revolt in Virginia in 1800 with Gabriel, and Gabriel had fed on the language, the revolutionary language from the United States, from the French Revolution, and from the Haitian Revolution. That sent shockwaves throughout the United States, and Virginia was trembling at the expansiveness of Gabriel's revolt. And the response was, the wrong people are getting the word about freedom and democracy. The wrong people are hearing this revolutionary language and thinking that it applies to them. So this was the journey that I was on to hear and to get into this milieu of how frightening, how dangerous Black people were seen as, and then to follow it all the way through to the 21st century by looking at, do Black people have the right to bear arms? Do they have the right to a well-regulated militia? Do they have the right to self-defense? And seeing how in each of those it has been used against Black people. And that the legal status of Black folk has not altered that significantly. So whether enslaved, whether free Black, whether denizen, which was that halfway limbo land between enslaved and citizen, whether newly emancipated free people, whether Jim Crow Black, or whether post-civil rights African American, the right to bear arms, the right to a well-regulated militia, and the right to self-defense are in fact fractured. That citizenship is fractured. It is hobbled by this intense anti-Blackness, this fear of Black people, this sense of Black people as a danger to white American society.
In particular, the role of Black militias, which you talk about in the book, their role in the early 19th century, to what use they were deployed, and then how it is that whites stripped Black militias of their official standing.
Yes, and so in Louisiana, when it was still the Louisiana Territory, it was before the U.S. had purchased it, but it was on its way. It was on its way. You had a well-heeled, well-trained Black militia that had been very effective. Well, as the U.S. came in, one of the first cries coming out of white New Orleans was to strip the Black militia, disband the Black militia. Well, the governor, William Claiborne, at the time, at first he's like, yes, asking for more arms because we have all of these free blacks and we've got these black folks with arms. And so he's asking for more arms from the federal government. But then he starts noticing how effective this black militia is. And so he tries to square the circle. White fear and the sense that the black militia is the only real effective fighting force there, given all of the challenges that are happening in that territory at the time. And so what he comes up with is to remove the black officer class from this black militia and put in white officers, thinking that that will be enough for whites in New Orleans who want the black militia disbanded. But then there is a massive, massive slave revolt coming from Charles Deslandes. And this massive slave revolt that included somewhere between 150 to 500 people headed to New Orleans, headed to what they believed was freedom, just sent terror through what is called the German coast of Louisiana. And so William Claiborne, seeing this massive movement, this massive slave revolt, in fact begins to enlist the black militia as part of the forces to take on this slave revolt. And the slave revolt is crushed. The U.S. Army comes in, the U.S. Navy comes in, you have the white militia that is there, but the black militia is very effective. And so you have a black militia fighting against black folk who are enslaved and trying to be free. The reward that the black militia received for this was a further push to be disbanded, further push to not have access to be able to purchase arms. They put a law in place that folks of color, black people, could not buy arms. Then came the War of 1812, and Andrew Jackson is the leader, the military leader, and he sees the British coming in this Battle of New Orleans. And he sees this black militia and he's telling Claiborne, we need them. This is an effective fighting force. And Claiborne's like, yes, they are, but I'm telling you, they're just not feeling it right now because of the way we treat them. And he's like, I will treat them equally. I will treat them with the honor that all soldiers should have, and they will be paid equal to whites. They will receive the same pay. And besides the black militia, I want 2 additional battalions. Claiborne came back and he said, you can get the black militia, but getting 2 additional battalions is going to be difficult because whites in this area believe that arming them is arming the enemy. So you have black folks who are identified as the enemy. And in that fighting force, that force beat the British. It was like 3,000 or so of Andrew Jackson's troops against 8,000 British troops, and they won. And Andrew Jackson was like, wow, I knew you guys were good. I just didn't know how good. But the response, the reaction to that then was to send them off as a labor battalion to work in the swamps that white men didn't want to go into to do the work. So you have this denigration of black military contributions to fighting for America. And that was a consistent theme that we saw. So you get this erasure of this history, and it's erasure for the men themselves who are doing the fighting, who are being wounded, who are dealing with the loss of their fighting brethren. That has been the sense that black men under arms, they're a threat. And black men who are trained how to use arms, they're really a threat. So they must be disarmed after they have served our purpose.
Are you seeing and hearing the disproportionate gaps between the races? Gaps between prosperity and wealth? It's all by design. Opportunity and lack thereof? Speak on it. The gaps between understanding one another viewpoints. You listening? The gaps between health between providing the bare necessities to protect and provide for you and your family and yourself. You know what that feel like? The gap between housing, I do. The gap between education, the gap between freedom and liberty is real. Some have obtained it and they live in their dream, but to others it's a nightmare. But they still going through it. You know what I'm saying? Those old demons coming back to hunt him. Jacob's trouble. He saw it. The gap between justice and those who the injustice is done against. You ain't never lied. And aimed at. The gap of equality. You know? The gap of accountability. People got their eyes wide shut. You know, it's like a double standard. It's true. You got laws stated on their books to, you know how they do, prosecute and persecute criminals who they deem criminals, but laws that are set up by the lawless, and they break the Father's laws, who are actually criminals. They are using their power the earth given into the hands of the wicked, to set a snare. And once they got you in their system, they'll never let you go. But try telling that to a people that sleep, loving the slumber. This ain't a black or white thing. It really ain't, not at all. It's really, although they'll use that to their advantage, a spiritual thing. Those who are woke of biblical proportions, good against evil, those who sleep, evil against good. Bring it out. The two powers, opposite of the other, fighting for dominance. One world coming to its end. I know you see, right at the precipice, in the climax, I mean you gotta see it, of its height of wickedness, about to plunder into the abyss of no return, about to self-destruct, and one rising up, coming back under from the ruins, who have been set desolate and purposely held back for ages on end, on purpose, but yet thanks be to the Almighty, now it's our time, who is merciful to take our stand, because His love endures forever. It does. And because of His tender mercies, we are not consumed. I'm gonna get right to it now and connect this biblically through the scriptures. Genesis 15:12-14 is when Abraham laid down and had a vision, and actually it was horrifying, more like a nightmare. He saw his descendants, you and I, that would be living in this day and age. Our ancestors who served captivity, and the Most High told them the nation whom they would serve, He would bring them out, and that nation He would judge, the Most High, but also that we would come out with great substance. Now you think that it's gonna lay down and roll over and give it to you? Abba gonna make it happen. In Habakkuk 2, verses 8-10, it talks about the one who spoiled many nations. Who did that? All the remnant of them people just spoiled them because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land and the city where they dwell therein. It also talks about woe to them that covet an evil covenant to their house, that they may set themselves on high. You can connect that with Obadiah. Well, how does one covet an evilness to their house? Well, simply put, if you think about it, if you have descendants or offspring and they learn of your ways, that's your house. They remain and pick up where you left off at, and they do the same. And if you was going against the Most High and you was coveting and raping and pillaging the earth, then they would have these same characteristics, like you. They consuming and coveting evil to their house, like you. That's in the book of Obadiah, speaking of verses 6, where it talks about how the things of Esau are sought out, or how the hidden things are sought up. I mean, they just racking up a lot of woe and indignation from the Almighty on the top of their pay. You know, in verses 9 it talks about, and the mighty men of Teman shall be dismayed, to the end that every one of the Mount Esau may be cut off by slaughter. For what? Verses 10. For the violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. In other words, no more kingdom, no more sword, wherewith your father, our father, AHCH, had blessed you with, that you would eat on the high places of the earth and inherit those things and break the yoke of your brother Jacob off your your neck. Now, it's time for you to serve. And I forgot about Genesis 27 and 41, where Esau said, the days of mourning of my father is over. And when that time comes, that he was going to slay his brother Yaquah. That's why we're going through all these things right now, I am. Now, I wanted to hit us with Isaiah 63, verses 1 through 6. You can precept that with Amos 9 and 8, where the Most High says that he will uproot the wicked king from under the whole heaven. Nah, I can't leave it like that, you know. I got to expound. Man, Elder, you and talk to people's ears off. That's why people don't ever come back to listen to you. That's alright, the heavens is though, and the remnant that's really woke while they watching and praying. SELAH. Armor up. Check me out one time. Hey, look, YASHA. This but the truth. Same blood of Yasha that's flowing through my veins. Hard to explain, got me feeling a certain type of way. Living in the land is strange, trying to maintain on the 5th day of this fast, trying to put my old ways. Can't be expecting different results doing the same thing. So no more flame me young, good New York State. Gotta curb my appetite while watching my intake. Follow YASHAYAH, MASHAYACH, my sensei. Full of the word, I push rhymes like Wayne. And when Yasha spotted me, the bitch won't break. Amos 1 and 11, read what they say. Needless to say, Zechariah 1 and 15. Before we take this short break, let me give you some dates. 630 BC to 445 BC, and everything in between. Daniel's born in 620 and 605. Judah's invaded by the Babylonian king. 602, the Babylonian king. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, then Daniel's brought in to do his thing. Since the decree was given by the king to destroy all the wise men in his kingdom and the places that they be. 16 astrologers and counting and symbols is getting through it. Had to bring the anointing of the Father to see him through it, and prophesy about the world greatest superpower that will bring all powers on this earth under his dominion and rulership. Nebuchadnezzar seen the vision, made him shaking his boots and cringe, but Daniel, he knew the vision fluent. So when he broke it down to him about the Israelite kingdom that be ruling under YASHA, MASHAYACH, let's go run it congruent. But it be 4 beasts that be ruling over and domineering over the chosen, to the Father send his Son to do him. You don't believe me, watch me prove it, cause this the 4th kingdom that prophesied of the Father, bring them down to their ruin. You don't think they know what they doing, while every policy and legislation that's aimed at the saints. And don't tell me it ain't, cause everything they propose to us to be good, it really turned out that it ain't. You didn't hear what that lady said? Rewind this back and play it. But if you choose to be ignorant, you can't blame nobody but yourself, cause you can't stand in the kingdom when YASHA come to be glorified in his holy saints. I'm trying to be cool because I'm humble, but it's hard to communicate when dealing with these proud folks that's used to evil communications and don't accept admonishment for the Father's children, so when they speak it's irate. Time to get back to these dates before we get up out of here, YASHA. I pray you've been blessed by this as our message. So we know that in 602 and 603, between that time that Daniel broke the interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and then in 605, Daniel and other nobles were deported. Nebuchadnezzar, driven insane in 573 BC, 566 BC, Nebuchadnezzar restored. And then in 539, we see that Cyrus, the kings of Persia and the Medes, come by and smash on the Babylonian kingdom. Therefore, in 538, Cyrus gives a decree that the Jews are to be released and go back to YASHA. 510 BC, temple restoration begins. Between 510 and 445 BC, when Nehemiah and the Jews rebuilt the walls of YASHA. That's true. You know, the whole message and purpose of Daniel's ministry and prophecy was to exhort and encourage the children of YASHA who would be living under tyranny and persecution from foreign, wicked, lawless powers, and ultimately that the Most High God had ruled all kingdoms of men.